Saygıdeğer konuklar, Cumhurbaşkanlığı
Distinguished guests, welcome to NATO 2030 for United for a New Era panel, held with the cooperation of the Director of Communications by Izmir Regional Directorate and, of course, your valuable contributions. As for the 69th anniversary of Turkey's membership to NATO. Our panel will be broadcasted on YouTube, both in English and Turkish. In Turkey, we are NATO communications company, aims at creating awareness in member state communities, especially in the younger generations, regarding NATO and its role and activities in global security. Today is the 69th anniversary of Turkey's membership to NATO, and we are more than happy to see you with us at this third panel program as part of the communications campaign we have held in this respect. The vision of NATO in 2030 is being explained by experts provided by the NATO General Secretary within the framework of the alliance political dimension and to strengthen this dimension. NATO 2030, United for a New Era, will start with the inauguration speech of Professor Fahrettin Altun, and then it will continue with the We Are NATO communications campaign. It will be followed by the NATO former General Secretary Ambassador's speech. And I would now like to proceed with Mr. Altun's speech. To carry NATO forward into the 2030, it creates a new and forward-looking basis. And we are proud that the former Ambassador Tarcan İldem is also included in the experts group that the NATO General Secretary has appointed for this significant job. Among the 138 NATO member states, the opinions, the strategy change was one of the foregoing ideas. Actually, the challenges that we are facing globally today show that NATO will continue to have a great importance. Solidarity and harmony among the states is of utmost importance. Threats that allies issue against each other and the downplay of NATO's function by the politicians is actually not helping the situation at all. We want NATO to serve as a key platform to address the transatlantic issues and to resolve disputes between these allies. The Turkish Presidency's Directorate of Communications have started the We Are NATO campaign since 2019 September. In this respect, our goal is to provide information to create an awareness in the new generations. Over the past year, despite the pandemic, Turkey has effectively joined many of the activities held within the framework of this campaign. As you well know, Turkey has joined NATO 69 years ago, and with the potential contributions of NATO to our country with respect to democracy and the free use of rights. As a result of Turkey's admission to NATO, NATO itself gained a big strength. Our troops deployed in thousands of kilometers away in Korea. And over the years, Turkey became NATO's second largest standing army and one of the top 5 contributors to NATO missions and operations around the world. Today, we are among a handful of allies with air-to-air refueling aircraft. And we are one of the 8 top contributors to NATO's budget as well. Earlier this year, we have taken over the special force, and we have supported 4,200 soldiers. And we also support NATO's standing maritime group at all times. Turkey has lived up to its responsibilities until their admission to NATO, and we continue to keep our end of this promise, this alliance. It is clear, however, that our alliance is desperately in need of adaptation to the contemporary threats. And we cannot appreciate the global threats with the overview that we have today. We have to act more decisively, more effectively, and proactively. In this regard, the Turkish people urge their allies to stand with them against acts of terrorism. Together with all fellow NATO members, we must bring about change that's absolutely necessary to adopt a principle. After all, the indivisibility of security is the backbone of our alliance. To uphold these principles is the only surefire way to ensure the trustworthiness of NATO in the next decade. At the same time, all members need to stay away from the populist declarations that will hurt NATO's strength in the meantime. Some of our allies make reckless statements and effectively side with terrorist entities, unfortunately, and our common enemy during our fight against terrorists across NATO's borders is most devastating for us. Such behavior also casts a shadow over our faith in the alliance. I must add that such dishonorable policy choices also tarnish NATO's reputation. It is only natural to expect that our allies offer their unconditioned support to Turkey's fight against the killers of innocent civilians. Distinguished guests, as Turkey sticks to a principled and bold position on terrorism, some attempt to raise questions about our nation's NATO alliance and even accuses us of searching for an alternative alliance. From time to time, we witness attempts in the US and Europe to open to discussion Turkey's membership to NATO. Frankly, we find such words ignorant, reckless, and improper, no matter who utters them. Questions of global security cannot be debated on social media platforms by self-proclaimed experts and mid-level think tank employees. If such a discussion ever takes place, it will be at the request of the Turkish Republic. I would like to reiterate once again that where Turkey stands, the extraordinary contributions we made to our alliance over the past 7 decades speak for themselves. anyhow. Yet we expect our allies to stand with Turkey when the safety of our citizens is on the line, just as we have served the cause of peace and stability in Korea, Afghanistan, Mali, and Kosovo. In this regard, we oppose any steps in Libya that weaken NATO's southern rank. In Syria and Iraq, we strongly oppose efforts to harm and support terrorism in the name of fighting terrorism. Instead, we urge our allies to take necessary steps together to neutralize the threats we face today. We expect the same kind of commitment to Turkey's national security from our allies. Unfortunately, we have not witnessed that kind of sensitivity as yet. Turkey not only did not receive due support from NATO against serious threats to international security, but also became the target of unjust and unlawful punitive measures over its legitimate attempts to stay safe. We face today a betrayal from our allies in Syria, where we strive to end our alliance and to ensure our national security and to prevent civilian losses, which may have devastating results for Europe, just as we have been betrayed before, where we conducted a peace operation under international law in Syria. The strongest member of our alliance has equipped the terrorist organization PKK's Syrian component like a professional army, as rockets fired from northern Syria killed Turkish citizens. By contrast, our allies kept their silence and failed to support our attempts to take necessary precautions. Ironically, those who kept their silence when Turkey's air defense was suffering did everything in their power to stop us from purchasing the S-400 air defense system with our own resources. Turkey became the target of a smear campaign even though 3 other countries were involved, and the delivery of F-35s that we have already paid for to purchase have not been delivered yet. We could not even take back the planes that we have sent for maintenance. To add insult to injury, Turkey was charged for the storage of these planes. Despite efforts by some allies to reduce Turkey's level of deterrence, at each step we took, we ensured the strength of the alliance. It should be perfectly clear by now that Turkey is no country to kneel when it is abandoned. As our president repeatedly said, a bad neighbor turns a man into a homeowner, and it did. We worked day and night to build our own military base. We are making progress in every step in producing the military equipment and machinery. At the end of the day, military, economic, and diplomatic power is not a choice, but it is a necessity. One must work hard to pursue ambitions. Indeed, this is a nation that has a message to convey to the world. Dear participants, I must add with great sorrow that the regal leader of the FETÖ terrorist organization that perpetrated he continues to live freely in the United States. The memory of the military's infiltration and the minds of our countrymen. Until now, Turkey's rightful request for the extradition of FETÖ's leader has not been realized. Let me stress that the constantly anti-Turkish position of the United States when it comes to fight against terrorist entities like PKK, YPG, and FETÖ is extremely hurtful. Terrorism has no race, color, language, or religion. The idea that one group of terrorists are bad and another group of terrorists are acceptable serves the interests of no country. I would like to take this opportunity to remind one more time that our citizens, whom PKK terrorists cowardly martyred, I pray for their souls. And I must say that the initial reaction from the U.S. State Department was far from satisfactory. That our American colleagues, who seem to have an opinion about everything happening in Turkey, refrained from making a clear statement about a mass execution by the PKK, was hurtful and infuriating. Some appear to have forgotten that PKK is in the business with BHKPG and the sisters with PYD and PYG, which you have provided arms for. Indeed, the U.S. Consulate General in Erbil, too, was attacked. Until now, Turkey, regardless of their penetrators, took action against terrorism. And it is only rightful that we expect the same from our allies. In Turkey's fight against terrorism, unfortunately, is not acceptable, and Turkey is an indispensable member of NATO. As such, we do not blame our alliance for the behavior of some allies, of course. Indeed, that position has been confirmed by our president and the NATO General Secretary. We experience today new and unprecedented problems. We face the kinds of challenges and threats that no country can easily address by itself. From this strategic perspective, alliances become even more important, and the laws regarding alliances need to be redefined. Turkey has not turned down any request for support and assistance. We are prepared to do today what we did some 70 years ago, to bring tangible results. And we hope that our allies will support us with similar behavior and to add strength to our alliance. Thank you for joining our meeting, our panel today, and I hope this panel discussions will broaden our horizons. I wish you the best of all. Thank you very much. We are NATO, united for a new era. Has prepared a video, and we would now like to share it with you.
Birlikte hareket ediyoruz. NATO'ya desteğimiz Türkiye'nin ittifaka katıldığı 1952 yılına dayanmaktadır. NATO görev ve harekatlarına en fazla katkı sağlayan ülkelerden biriyiz. İttifaktaki ilk kadın jet pilotu Leman Bozkurt Altınçekic'in Türk olmasından gurur duyuyoruz. Kendisi orduya katılmak üzere olan birçok genç kadın ve erkek için ilham kaynağı olmuştur. Her NATO üyesinin eşit derecede söz hakkı var. Kararları birlikte alıyoruz. Birlikte daha güçlüyüz ve daha güvendeyiz. Vatandaşlarımız için barış ve istikrarın sağlanmasına kendimizi adamış durumdayız ve NATO ortağı ülkeleri aktif şekilde desteklemekteyiz.
Şimdi NATO 2030 yeni bir çağ için birliktelik raporunun detaylarını dinlemek üzere NATO Uzmanlar Grubu üyesi, NATO eski Genel Sekreter Yardımcısı Büyükelçi Sayın Tacan İldem'e bağlanıyoruz.
Türkiye'nin
Turkey's membership to NATO, it is the 69th year of NATO's membership, the Turkey's membership to NATO, and I'm really glad to be participating this event, and I would like to welcome you all. NATO Leaders Summit in 2019 had a decision in order to develop the political dimension of the members. To the General Secretary, and a directive is given, a proposal is given, and it is named, the process named as NATO 2030 started, and a group of consultants, the experts, have been created, and from 30 countries, 10 experts have been selected, and among them there are some former ministers of defense and foreign affairs, and in this group there are 5 males and 5 females, and starting with 2020, for 8 months they couldn't meet, unfortunately, because of the pandemic conditions, but online they had meetings, and then this had to be executed in this way, and sometimes the meetings lasted for 6 hours. And within these meetings, at the moment, NATO's threats and tests that they have been testing and facing, and some possible security problems that could be met in the future have been talked about, and some idea exercises have been executed during these meetings. And when we look at this report, we have to say that, first of all, NATO, over 70 years in its existence, it has been established on transatlantic connections, and common benefits and common values have been shared for the allies, and it's a foundation of a consultation forum, and it has been protecting this status. But we have to emphasize that if NATO, in its 70 years of past, if it has been a successful organization and alliance, it has to be taken into consideration that the changing security environment has been adapted successfully. And nevertheless, for the aim of this study, in fact, as Mr. Altun mentioned previously, is the future tests and challenges of the alliance, especially for the new security environment. And at the moment, in the security environment has many uncertainties and complications. On one hand, there are traditional threats and there are new challenges we can see. NATO General Secretary, when he was starting this process, he mentioned that alliance should be strong militarily, and then it should be in harmony with its members, and the threats were taken into consideration, and maybe the alliance should have a newer point of view, a global point of view. These were in the instructions, the directives from the Council. The group were asked to be studying on, for the alliance, there should be adaptation and how to strengthen this harmony. And among allies, the consultation and cooperation, how can we increase that? And then the third one is the alliance's political role, how it should be developed and improved, and against the challenges, what the tools at hand should be used. And as the experts group in our studies, in fact, instead of focusing on the past, we try to have a vision towards the future. And within this study, during this study, first and foremost, existing threats and challenges have been taken into consideration, and then we try to think forward. And there are 138 concrete suggestions in our report. And 138 suggestions, as you can see, as you can imagine, we cannot claim that they are vitally important. However, all of them for the future of NATO they're going to contribute to strengthen the role of NATO in the future. And the aim of these suggestions, when we look at them, the alliance's dimension will be developed and improved. As we all know, in 2014, the Russia Federation, against the law, invaded Crimea and had aggressive policies in East Ukraine, and then it was a negative point for NATO. And starting from that year, when we look at the decisions taken, NATO forces have increased their preparation levels, and then the existing sustainability conditions were improved, and new military headquarters, establishment of new military headquarters have been thought of, and there are comprehensive efforts on these aims. And starting with 2014, the military harmonization and adaptation have really been improved. And now the aim is the political dimension will have an harmonious adaptation complying with the military aims, so that NATO will go on being strong politically. And in the public belief, there is a belief that as if NATO is a military organization, but starting from the establishment of NATO, it has been a political and military organization, and the upper organ, where the decisions were taken was political, and I mean that with that the council. And then every week, I'm not talking about the level of the continuous meetings, but the ministries of defense and foreign affairs have been having meetings, and also there are NATO summits at the level of presidency. So the political feature of NATO should be focused. And the main findings of the report could be maybe mentioned as the most important outcome of the report is that the new strategic concept should be prepared. In fact, maybe a more correct explanation could be like this. In 2010, the accepted strategic concept will be updated. We suggested the update of that concept. The existing concept should be updated. That was our suggestion. And as you all know, in the existing concept, there are three aims of NATO: collective defense, and depending on cooperation, the security. And these three roles of NATO should be taken into consideration, and we have put it in the report. In the strategic concept, or the updating of strategic concept, we should not see it as a magic wand, because this, when it is accepted, the threats and challenges will be overcome. Of course, we should not think that way, but starting with the year of 2010, in the security atmosphere, there have been fundamental changes, and then maybe a vision taking this into consideration should be considered. And by this month, the alliance, politically and militarily, they do not lack the documents, and European Atlantic area document accepted for the European field, and there are some documents taken, especially for the dissuasive developments, and these decisions will be taken into consideration. And the report's second outcome is that about Russia, the observations about Russia, as you know, in 2019 Leaders Summit, London meeting, after that meeting, there was a declaration announced, and Russia was one of the two threats of NATO, facing NATO. And then, excessively, this report was confirmed by the period by the groups, and then this should be valid as well. And this should be also taken into consideration, that it should be a two-lane report. What does it mean? That the dissuasive precautions and measures should be taken, and also in order to mitigate the risk, the dialogue with Russia should be kept on. So, as you know, Russia Federation should comply with the international legal system, and they should be open to negotiations, and Russia's aggressive policies in order to especially stop or just mitigate these risks, they should be taken under control. And these were our suggestions in that report. And another most important part of the report is about China, because for economical growth, and for military growth, China is a rising country, and there are some challenges coming from China, and it should be also a point of consultation within NATO, and they should be evaluated systematically within NATO, because as the time goes on in international relations, there are big competitions, and we are evolving into this competitive environment, and especially in China's moves in technology. And dissuasive precautions are going to be more important. And within this concept, the technologies, emerging new technologies, are another dimension of the report, and the innovation should be prioritized, and this point will keep the members, the NATO and the allies, technologically strong, and these are important points. Naturally, when we were preparing this report in those days, Turkey was buying S-400 from Russia, and it was a discussion point in the public eye. And the emerging technologies part was written because of that as well. And when you read the report, you will see that the relating technology transfer within the alliance, some questions within the alliance will only be used by the accountants, and the coordination within the alliance should be the prior role. So military technological cooperations should be strengthened, and more investments are really needed, especially for Turkey. These are one of the determinations by Turkey. So within the alliance, the allies should be met their military needs in an emergent way, and this coordination should be provided rapidly. And another important part of the report is terrorism. As you can see, as you all know, in 2019 Leaders Summit, it was one of the two most important threats that the ally faces. And naturally, the fight with terrorism should be an important responsibility for the allies as well. And this responsibility, in order to empower this responsibility, it is really important for the allies. And the terrorism is an asymmetric and prioritized threat, and it has been mentioned in the report more than once. And all the forms and realizations of terrorism is important. So this should be strongly cursed, and a country like us that suffered terrorism for a long time. And the last example of was the Gara example, and it was a really important point for the report. And within the report, we have created one special part for terrorism, and also struggle for terrorism should be included in different parts of the report as well, and it has been numerously focused in the report as well. Another important point is in the report is that from the challenges coming from the South, it's not only terrorism or not the migration, not the migration-related complications, and also Russia and China have been really important roles in this international security problems. And another point is that the human security, pandemics, and climate changes, and these are some of the parts of the hybrid changes. And also another important point is that disinformation and then the mass communication should be strengthened among the allies. And this is also emphasized in the report. Another heading of the report is that the political unity and also coherence, coordination and coherence. And among the allies, there should be a behavior, the code of behavior among the allies. Let's remember in 2019, in the Leaders' Summit, the presidents and prime ministers were or had to behave in that way because the French president mentioned the ally as the patient whose death of brain was realized. So, or maybe there was a complaint in it that within the allies, the consultancy system was not really working a lot. And we know that during that time in Syria, France thought that they would not taken into consideration and their and they maybe were facing some problems because the country, France, thought that they were not asked and their opinion were not asked in Syria matter. And maybe the attitude of France, I hope, will be considered again. So in the report, the claims like the death of brain of a patient. So these kinds of terms, these kinds of statements maybe will put the ally in a difficult position. So maybe the ally will change itself accordingly with the coordination and coherence of the members. And another point is that in two organizations, there are some challenges, and these two organizations have their important abilities, and the European Union and NATO, they have, according to their directives, there are some legal fundamental points within these organizations, and after the report has been presented to the press, we saw that there were some information given to press on purpose, and there and the Southern Cyprus will be included in the organization, in the alliance. But of course, these are all speculative news, as you can see when it is read in the report. For Turkey, the coordination of these two organizations are still taken into consideration, and the principle of the consensus is always taken into consideration, and consensus is going to be kept, and in the decision-making process, in order to speed it, there are some suggestions in the report as well, because in today's hybrid threats, cyber threats, in the past, there were two situations, clear situations like war and peace. But of course, this creates a gray area. So this also affects fast decision making. And I think I'm towards the end of my time for my presentation, but I would like to also focus on the place of Turkey in NATO. In NATO, Turkey is one of the most important allies. And Mr. Altun mentioned that within NATO, Turkey's contributions in NATO, in the history of NATO, he mentioned them, and I'm not going to repeat them, but as I have been a representative in NATO, Turkey's place, important status of Turkey in NATO during my posts in NATO, I have always felt and seen, and I have always felt the pride of it, and I have always been proud of it. And Turkey has equal rights, and we know that Turkey has been listened to in NATO, and he has played an important role, and it has a critical, geopolitical critical role in NATO, and we know that. But of course, we should see that Turkey is important for NATO as well. And we were on the same side, and if we are on the same side and share the same values, if we are the founding member of European Council, these are not all coincidences. NATO has been offering a dissuasive umbrella for the member countries. So if a country is, the speaker cannot be heard properly, but in the discussions,
katkısı bir kenara konduğunda dahi Türkiye'nin NATO'ya üye olmamasının
Turkey's not being a member of NATO and not being benefited from the dissuasive role of NATO. Of course, it should be taken into consideration. Let's not forget that recently the
güvenlik danışmalarına fırsat veren, imkan veren
NATO's
veren müttefiklerin başında Türkiye geldi.
defense suggestions in the Article number 4, Turkey has played an important role
Türkiye'nin
in
ihtiyacı
that
olan,
respect.
önem verdiği dayanışma mesajlarını da
And the
açıklamalarında
solidarity
bir
messages
şekilde ifade
given
edilmiştir.
by Turkey was also stated.
Kamuoyumuzun
Lastly,
bilgilendirilmesi yönündeki
in order to inform the public, we are NATO campaign.
Türkiye'de ulusal düzeyde de
At the national level, it has been started in Turkey, and I would like to mention that it is a really important and beneficial campaign for Turkey.
bir kamu tartışmasının olabildiğini görüyoruz.
And we can see that it has been affecting the public discussions in a positive way, and I can understand that there are some problems bilaterally, and this perception, the negative perception, can be strengthened by that. But Fahrettin Altun mentioned that it should not be considered for the whole alliance, and the discussions should be taking place in a concrete way, in a constructive way, and there is going to be a panel participated by valuable participants, and I'm sure it's going to be contributing to the information of the young people, especially the flow of information and the flow of knowledge will be provided for younger generations. And with these thoughts, I would like to thank you all for your participation. And thank you very much to Tacan İldem. Now, United for a New Era, NATO 2030, I would like to invite the rector of Altınbaş University, Professor Dr. Çağrı Erhan, the member of Security and Foreign Policies Council, and Professor Dr. Murat Yeşildaş from Ankara Social Sciences University International Relations Department, and Sayın Aylin Ünver Noy from Haliç University International Relations Academician.
Cumhurbaşkanlığı İletişim Başkanlığı tarafından
Distinguished guests, participants, welcome to this significant meeting, NATO 2030, United for a New Era. I would like to also welcome those who have joined our YouTube broadcast. Distinguished former ambassador has pointed out, this is a significant day in the history of Turkey. This is the 69th anniversary of Turkey's membership to NATO, alongside Greece. Actually, it's the 70th anniversary of Turkey's first step to become a member and being recommended as a member. Before passing the word to the speakers, I would like to say a few words about the history of our relationship with NATO, and then we will leave the floor to distinguished Çağrı Erhan. Turkey's admission to NATO has not been a smooth process. We can now see everything in the archived documents. United States Foreign Relations Secretary has you can reach the foreign relations documents of the United States on the internet. The archives are there. Unfortunately, the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Relations have not released their documents, so we can't double check on both sides. I have read the archives for the United States Foreign Relations, and I can see that it was not a smooth process. Arthur Wanderberg took the decision known as the Wanderberg decision, and the Monroe Doctrine was amended. And we became aware of the North Atlantic Alliance program. And in 1948, autumn, the America First takes the first step and says that they would like Turkey to be part of it. However, this is going to be an Atlantic alliance. But as Turkey is not part of this geography, you will be part of a Mediterranean alliance. A month later, they make an offer to Italy to join. And Turkey turns around and says, well, you have not accepted us because we are not an Atlantic country, but you have accepted Italy. However, in Italy, we see a threat of communism in Italy, and we want to include Italy so that communism will not become an even bigger issue for Italy. But there's no communism threat in Turkey, so please continue your work in the Mediterranean alliance. However, I see in the archives that at the time, Turkey is faced with a large threat from the Soviet Union. They are asking for an amendment in the Montreux agreements so that they can have a military base there, and they also want Kars and Ardahan, parts of the Turkish land, to be passed on to Georgia. If Turkey was to become a member state and Turkey got involved in a war with the Soviet Union, this could be the cause of the Third World War, because the whole alliance would have had to enter war. The United States and UK do not invite Turkey to join NATO. However, in 1950, with the elections. Just 4 days before the elections in Turkey, the Turkish government, led by CHP, makes an official application to join NATO. 10th of May, to be exact. And the official answer to this was negative. UK and the United States had a certain point of view for Turkey and Greece. They were seen as two countries where NATO, it would be a good idea to have NATO bases, and on the other hand, to keep them outside the alliance. So what changed and caused Turkey to become a member? The first change is success of the Turkish international relationships. In 2039, Turkey had an alliance agreement with UK. And this alliance continues even after the Second World War. So, according to this agreement, if Turkey is under attack, then UK is supposed to support Turkey. The Turkish ambassador in Washington says that you are not accepting us as an ally, but we are allies with the UK, and UK is a member to NATO, and UK is going to have to support us, which means that they will have to go to war with Soviet Union, and in turn you would have to go and support UK. Please check Truman years, 1947, and NATO. Check Turkey from the index, and you will see what I have said is actually from that resource. So, United States then decides that no matter if Turkey is an official member or not, UK will have to support Turkey, and then the remaining alliance will have to support UK. And the second reason for this amendment is the global conjuncture. As you know, the Soviet Union invents the atom bomb. So whether they invent it themselves or whether they do it through U.S. support, illegal U.S. support, of course, however, the fact that the Soviet Union has managed this, the United States needed some military bases. As part of the Truman support to military sources, some groups of experts visited Turkey, and they made a request for establishing a military base in Turkey. Turkey says that we are not part of NATO as it stands, and if we allow you to build a military base as a non-member, we will become a bare target for the Soviets. So if you all accept us as an official member, we will allow you to have a military base, especially for surveillance reasons. A military base was of utmost importance for NATO at the time. So this was provided by Turkey, and Greece, because they were close enough geographically to Syria to take action when needed. Turkey sending troops to Korea has nothing to do with an invitation to becoming part of NATO. This is part of Turkish history, but it is not correct, because the first application we made was before the Korean War. Yes, perhaps the government may have thought that let's send the troops to Korea, and perhaps they will then accept us in NATO. But I really don't see this happening. This was a historical introduction to our topic, but of course you want to listen to some contemporary information. So I would now like to leave the floor to Miss Aylin Noy. Thank you for this introduction, and also thank you for inviting me as a guest speaker. You have listened to valuable speeches of both the former ambassador and also the director of this department. And I would just like to make some additions to what they have already said. In both the Middle Eastern countries, Caucasians, Africa, and the active relationships have started to form, not only through mutual relationships, but also NATO's support to peace in Africa. As you know, Turkey is one of the largest donors with respect to humanitarian aid, and also in combating against pirating, and also supporting the building, the construction sector in this country, helps provide for peace and maintain peace in that country. In addition to all that, Turkey's mutual relationship that has been strongly built over the years has put great effort in helping stabilize and maintain the stability in the area. In many respects, in all these geographies, transportation and natural gas pipelines have helped support both the development of the areas financially, and also helping the building of peace. Turkey is one of the great supporters of this. Turkey is also among the countries who have supported the membership, official membership of a number of countries like Macedonia recently. And of course, the missions and military operations have been supported, and also supported stability and development of peace and maintaining peace in the region. Opening schools for girls in Afghanistan, for instance, was an important step in supporting the policies of NATO. The Syria and Iraq situation, especially the threats coming from the southern part. the operations held within the framework of NATO and outside the framework of NATO have helped the situation. And Turkey is also reducing the threat anxiety of other member states by helping the Syrian refugees and supporting them to go back to their own countries when the war has ended. Turkey not only has strengthened its own stability after joining NATO, it has also added, as I said, to the development of stability in the region. The transatlantic relations have a bumpy road, if you like. There are over time, certain disagreements have taken place, and they were overcome, and NATO continued to strive. Within NATO, the sharing of load and the fifth article, criticisms against this article were main reasons for disagreements. In 2010, the strategy concept is not only related to new threats that come by after 2010, but also to resolve issues amongst the member states as well. The name of this panel, or the communication campaign, is United for a New Era. So we can see that the unity will continue in the new era, and disagreements will be overcome. One of the main reasons for the report to be prepared, of course, the campaign to be prepared, is to further strengthen NATO's military and also political powers. We don't have enough time to discuss each and every item on the list. As part of the report, perhaps some parts were not prioritized in the beginning, but the political role of NATO and within the framework of the values, the political aspects will become more important in the future.
Especially recently, among the democracies, there is a going back in democracies, and illiberal concepts have become more prominent, and also China and Russia had some abuses of this situation. So among NATO, there is an emphasis on values. And Munich, in Security Conference, there was the idea of without being Western. So the idea of that and the precautions or measures to be taken about that was really important, and we can see that in 2030 report as well. And the establishment of excellence center and empowering of the values within the NATO. So this has been another focal point. And then another struggle for these values have also prominent, and especially for the pandemic period, there had been some precautions, and the freedom of travel have been taken from the hands of people. So in strategic concept document, when you look at this document, among the topic of epidemics, the outbreaks was really important, and in 2016, European National Strategic Document or European Union Security Strategic Document. So outbreaks and threats were taken as the topic for the reports, and these are really important, and especially for the overcoming of the weakness of NATO about the dissuasiveness of NATO. It's a kind of step to take control, and also it reflects a concept and understanding about that. In 2030, in the report of 2030, the human security concept has emerged, and in the United Nations report it has reemerged, and it's a new concept, and especially for human security there should be some steps taken, and then the public diplomacy should be taking place. And also I would like to mention that about the European disaster help organization, there were some solidarity, NATO solidarity movements, and then during the pandemics, during the outbreaks, the allies, the member countries helped each other. But the period after the outbreak is the vaccination period, and then without people in the world being vaccinated, then the second period, the second step will not be realized. So by cooperating with World Health Organization, NATO will contribute to its political role as well, because for NATO, it's not a new step for NATO, because about the coordination, European outbreak and disaster organization, NATO has played an important role as well. So NATO is experienced about human security as well. And about vaccination, NATO could play an important role, and then they could predict their role with the World Health Organization as well. And it's not going to be the last outbreak, and the climate change is another point of the report, and also the climate change will contribute, unfortunately, to the outbreaks as well. So, and this is a factor affecting security. And from Libya, from North Africa, there is migration, and of course there also creates some problems, security problems as well, and also a flow of migration has already started from the continent of Africa, and it's another threat for security. And also the climate changes will create this migration, the flow of migration, and also in the northern countries, in the northern areas, the competition will increase, and then dissuasive plans should be developed accordingly. And this climate change is really an important point for Turkey as well, and Turkey is one of the important countries that has been feeling this effect of climate change, and transition to clean energy or the increase of energy dependency, decrease of energy dependency, or the transition to other energy resources is another important point. And then emerging technology is another point in the report. Especially in the member countries, there are some different development levels, of course, and this could be an important point for the steps of NATO, and NATO is going to study this as well. And there can be some conflicts among two organizations like EU and USA, and digital services law and digital market law. And EU is trying to emphasize their leadership, and then this could create some conflicts. And in some areas, there are some active steps taken, and different initiatives started to play roles, and NATO could empower NATO as well. And 3Cs initiative, Baltic, Adriatic, and Black Sea within this initiative, and the countries within this area could coordinate and cooperate, supporting each other energy-wise. But EU and USA both support this initiative, and Turkey is not among them. And this initiative is established only for EU countries. And then these initiatives should be open to countries that are not member to EU as well, because energy security and energy cooperation and technology cooperation could be developed by taking Turkey into these initiatives, and then the bond of trust, the connection of trust could be developed, and then the difference among these countries could be also eliminated. And we can extend it to TESCO, as EU has some establishments. Another disagreement is between EU and USA are that within the EU agreements, for example, the NATO allies that are not member of EU cannot take place within these organizations. And strategic autonomy, if it goes on, it can deepen the conflicts, the disagreements. EU, like the non-member countries like UK, Turkey, and Canada, there should be a platform that these countries could take place within these initiatives or within these organizations, so that they can play roles and they can, and this could prevent discriminations as well. Again, another point is that both Mr. Altun and our ambassador mentioned in 2030 report, there is another point that is important for Turkey: terror, the heading of terror and cooperation and the crisis management, and these should be included within the report and this should be focused, this should be emphasized more, especially about terrorism. And it has been felt a lot, and Turkey has lost more than 40,000 citizens in terror events, and it is still going on. And because of that, it should be integrated in the roles of NATO, this terror, the heading of terror. And another point is that NATO's the support given to the NATO's East Wing, it should be given in the same way to its South Wing as well. Both Russia and China's existence, increasing existence in the southern areas, and it has been a threat, a growing threat recently as well, and with their existence, more importance has been given, and this is an important development for Turkey as well within this report. And in fact, there are many points, but one by one, talking about them is really impossible. But the success of NATO may be for its long-lasting existence is maybe because it can adapt itself to the new situations, new threats, new challenges, and new developments. And updating this strategy is also another activity for the adaptation. And I mentioned about the threats, but of course the solidarity of the allies is really important as well, or maybe we need to focus on that as well. And this process has started, and it has been going on significantly, and there are some new developments recently, and this has been reflected in the report because the conflicts among allies has been creating some problems in the problem-solving processes of NATO. And one of them was that in the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece and Turkey had really important problems, and there were some technical discussions, and Angela Merkel's efforts, diplomatic efforts, have tried and have benefited these two countries sitting at a table and being in a platform, in a shared platform in order to solve their problems, so that these blockages, these solutions could create a dialogue platform for the problems of the allies, and it showed us that NATO can contribute to these solutions of the problems among allies. And the changing security environment and the solidarity of alliance and increasing this alliance has been really prominent. And from this point of view, 2030 has many suggestions. It has 67 pages as suggestions, and implementing this and the implementation of it by the leaders of the country will create the allies more resilient, and the allies within their problems, they can adapt to new solutions, and the countries and the organizations will be more resilient. And that shows that this study is a really important study in this respect. And Turkey will be contributing to the solution of all these matters. And of course, the alliances will have a great role as well, and the empathy and this understanding will go on within the allies and the member countries. Thank you very much. About the report, it has been an information in depth, and as you can see, NATO for a long time, it has been gone to the beyond of being only a military alliance. It's also a security alliance as well. And the most important success of NATO, as it's a long-standing success, is its adaptation ability. Because in order to eliminate a threat, it was established. But after the threats have been eliminated, NATO went on existing. The Soviet socialist countries have been dispersed, and remember the structure beforehand. In 70s, 80s, there was a strong commandment structure, the Atlantic Commandment or Canal Commandment or Europe Commandment. But under that, there were some sub-units. And in the meantime, the NATO has transformed its strategic system. And in 1990, Rome initiative, following this initiative, the famous 50th year concept, NATO openly has been outside the Washington Agreement, and it has taken the roles outside that agreement, because the North Atlantic Agreement was that the North Atlantic Agreement, the area, and outside that, NATO should not be interested with Afghanistan and Somali. And the job description of NATO in the 5th and 6th descriptions in the articles, defined in the 51st of the article, when there is an aggression, fight, then they're going to fight back. But with the Lisbon and with the 2030 perspective, NATO outside them, out of area, out of business, they have been going on. And what's going to be its real area? Does NATO have an area? In fact, I remember, and I'm sure you remember as well, starting 2000s, so the question was, will NATO go global? Is it going to be a global organization? And then Russians were the allies at that time, and they were a part of the NATO, not the alliance, but there was some strategic cooperation. But after that, when the tension increased between Russia and NATO, the possibility of NATO being a global security organization was not considered, was eliminated. But later on, it has started to be a global organization. And, for example, strategic viruses, let the WHO deal with them. No, but NATO takes these problems into consideration, or the environmental issues, because there are some problems that are within the outbreaks, and then social crisis, and then the social crisis bring terrorism, and then the fake governments, and then these are taken as threats by the NATO countries. So the role of NATO globally, all threats, not only when the threats take place, the root reasons NATO start to think over, and the General Secretary and the member countries were given reports. So it has a preceptive studies. And Madeleine Albright, as you can remember, before the previous strategic concept, there were an experts group, a specialist group, and then the existing concept was created as a result of that. And I hope, as a result of this study, there will be a concept, there will be a repair concept satisfying all the allies. But the focal point is that for Turkey is the article number 5, and that article not being changed is really important. And also the struggle with terrorism, the allies should be in solidarity and in coordination. And
Aydın hocamı dinlediniz. Tabii sizin hem o konularda hem de doğrudan Türkiye NATO ilişkileri.
Now we will continue with distinguished Murat Yalçıntaş. I would like to thank the Directorate of Communications for inviting us as guest speakers, and also the organizers of this panel. It is difficult to be the last speaker because everyone has already said what needs to be said. And we are towards the end of our panel now. And to be honest, this is the first organization that I am attending in the past year. I mean, physically attending. So this is a change for us in the pandemic, really. I would like to examine if we can come up with a new roadmap for the relationship between NATO and Turkey. The pandemic is of utmost importance, I believe, for NATO, because there will be really strong implications as a result of corona in 3 different categories. The first one is has to do with health, of course. Not only individual health, but also public and global public health issues. COVID-19 virus that we are having to face right now. And we are struggling against this virus globally. There is a national priority, of course. On the other hand, it is a global issue. And the second category is around corona itself. And it has a very socio-psychological impact. In our everyday lives, our practices have changed. And it is very likely that these practices will continue to shape our behavior in the future. And as a social issue, of course, corona stands as a major problem. And thirdly, as a third category, it is a political and geopolitical issue, actually. So we have 3 different aspects: corona, pandemic, and COVID-19. So to analyze this, we are entering a high anxiety era. And this is not only on an individual basis, but it is on a public base and also global anxiety era. And this will have its impact on NATO as well and all other players. risk, the increased risk will become one of the most important characteristics of this high era. And now this risk, you may say, has been there since the beginning. However, now the risk is not only military, but also financial and geopolitical. Instability and not knowing what's going to happen in the future is a big question, whether the United States will continue to be the world leader, or is China going to become a new hegemony? Will the international financial system change? There are many questions, and certain people say that the system will remain, and others say the system will change completely. The position of the U.S., and we don't know how the new system will work and what the alternative systems will be. And the strategic power of the West is being questioned right now. So in this era of geopolitical risk issues, there are two main fields that NATO has to fight in, let's say, and they have already been discussed in detail by the previous speakers. And actually, this corona situation has even deepened the already existing issues in NATO. The character of certain issues have changed. We are not faced only with conventional security threats anymore, but we are faced with some hybrid threats. And of course, this is going to have its effects on NATO's 10-year plans. Following the Cold War, the U.S. emerged as a strategical power, and at the end of the Cold War, United States is the sole leader. This was a strategical foresight and by the U.S., and now this is proved to be wrong, and even the U.S. is saying that this was wrong. This struggle for power has come back, and of course this means that struggles in other aspects will increase. Terrorism is a growing threat, but it's not only growing, its character is changing. Looking at the terrorism index in the past several years, radical left and the white supremacist terror attacks have increased and actually exceeded the rightist and extreme religious or oriented terrorist attacks. This is showing us that terrorism has changed character, and the landscape orientation is in a trend for change as well. Where is this happening? If there are 30 member states to NATO, 25 of them are suffering from this. On the other hand, looking at the trends, NATO's member, Turkey, is in a strategic geopolitical situation right in the middle of the Middle East. So terrorism remains to be one of the most significant issues for NATO. Some of NATO's largest actors have increased their shares in the world's armed forces market. So we can say that conventional arming is becoming more important, and it is going to be in the center of NATO's discussions. I'm not talking about or raising the challenges, conventional challenges. I am talking more of the changed challenges. In the Trump era, the transatlantic stress have increased for the United States. Biden's discussion with NATO General Secretary's discussion was broadcasted. So this has a meaning, or part of it was broadcasted. As Dr. Aylin pointed out, there is a new search, and it is very probable that strategic autonomy may be achieved. This is not NATO's position. We are underlining the value for being united, right? The title of the panel is United for a New Era. This is the one stress. And the second stress is the main issues amongst or within NATO itself. NATO's discrepancies in coming up with different policies for different members, and lacking a united reaction to the events in the high anxiety era. Looking at Turkey's security issue, current military fighting. Turkey is in the middle of that. In Iraq, in Syria, Turkey is in the middle of that geography, and terrorism is certainly shaping the security actions of Turkey. United Arab Emirates is holding a military operation in Libya and working with a NATO ally. This has no place in NATO's strategy. A member state taking part with a non-member or a military exercise is being supported. Against who? Against another NATO member. So this is difficult. This situation is difficult to understand, and the struggle for power has has a special interest for Turkey's security issues. Migration has become a conventional risk for security for Turkey today. So the international policy character in Turkey will have to be well understood before we can start looking into its relations with NATO. Firstly, of course, struggling with terrorism is a main issue. Terrorism is a unified, a common, and emergency situation. However, in practice, collective defense is not happening. Turkey's struggle against DH coalitions and the support it has given, it has provided in this respect, does not match with the complex situation and the support Turkey has received in that respect. So, very popular today, compartization paradigm cannot be applied to this issue. There are many security threats, and there is a direct threat to Turkish nationals. Other members or member groups leading other policies not in support of Turkey's security is not sustainable. I will, of course, briefly talk of these issues, Syria, Iran, and Eastern Mediterranean issues. Turkey is directly a party of these issues, and the active military strategy led by Turkey recently needs to be discussed in the future, because potentially there is some opportunity for uniting and for collaboration.
And the S-400s in the center, it seemed as if it's a problem, but the Turkey's military activism, the industrial complex of Turkey has become a point which is not very supported within NATO. For example, the humanless air devices being bought from Canada, used in a war, was embargoed. And within the General Committee decisions, the invading country, against an invading country, the defense technologies sold by you was embargoed. And of course, the S-400 stress between the USA and Turkey, and it has been realized as an embargo. And of course, it has been emerged as a big problem, and then that led Turkey to a self-sufficient military organization of Turkey. Turkey trying to make itself as a more self-sufficient. And in some major problems, the relationships between Turkey and NATO should be put in a platform in a normalized way. And without being realized, the predictions to be realized for 2030 may not be possible. On the contrary, it can create a weakened alliance. So these concerns should be discussed and eliminated, and a practical area should be formed. Otherwise, a more stressful period can be created. Thank you very much. Thank you for your clear statements. And NATO and upper-level global topics, if they're going to struggle with them, the alliance and the allies within it should be kept normal, and the problems should be eliminated. And we have a very short time, but of course, there can be some questions to the panelists. So you can ask your questions in English or Turkish. The English ones will be translated, and then they're going to be answered in Turkish. And then the answer you're going to get will be in translation, simultaneous translation. So within this framework, the NATO 2030 United for a New Era, organized by the Directorate of Communications, and also it's the commemoration of the 69th year of Turkey's becoming a NATO member, and we have come to the conclusion of it. And before concluding the panel part, maybe as a summary, I would like to tell you a few sentences. And all our speakers, all our panelists underlined that the NATO is a military and political alliance, and Taycan Bey has mentioned as well, and Taycan Bey mentioned that, our ambassador mentioned that it's a military and political organization. And when we look at the first and second articles in the document, the freedoms, liberalization have been mentioned among countries, among member states, and in 1949 it was established based on that. And the member states of NATO, in their relationship, there can be some expectations among each other, especially Turkey for its struggle in terrorism. Whatever the third country's attitude is, the Turkey's reaction towards an ally could be more reactive, could be more important and significant. Why? Because we have been allies, and why they are reacting to my position, to my situation. So, for example, from Somalia, the Mediterranean endeavor practice and the Sheikh, all the exercises, we were in an arm's length, and we were supporting each other. And Turkey rightfully has a complaint that not a third country showing reaction, but an ally country showing reaction is really important. And in Gara, the terrorist organization executed 13 citizens of Turkey, and then it has shown the dirty face, the bad face of terrorism, and in the struggle for terrorism, against terrorism, it is a concept article within NATO, and we should not forget that. So thank you very much to our panelists on your behalf as well. Thank you. Dear guests, the panel program has been concluded, and thank you for your participation.